Right, welcome to my video on doing field sketches in geography. And this is a skill that normally would be done out in the field, but I'm going to show you today how to do this remotely. So firstly, you pick your site that you're going to take your field sketch. And I am currently in Birmingham, in the city centre on one of the canals, at a location near to where I used to live. And I'm on top of one of the bridges out of the back of the Symphony Hall and over towards Brindley Place. So I'm going to show you how I would put together a field sketch of this particular location. So first of all, I've got a piece of paper down here. I've got an A4 piece of paper, I've got a title up the top, field sketch from central Birmingham on the canals, and I've got an area in here where I'm going to draw my field sketch. So my first decision I've got to make is I'm going to decide which parts that I'm going to draw. But before that, I can even set up exactly what I'm going to do in terms of getting some data down for this field sketch. So there's a few important things you'll want to include with your field sketch. And one of those will obviously be a location. And I've got here field sketch in central Birmingham on the canals. But that's quite a vague location at the moment. The canals spread extensively across Birmingham, and I don't know whereabouts in Birmingham I am. So I probably want a more detailed location down on here. So I would go for something like either using a grid reference, or I could get myself a latitude and longitude. So if I was out in the field, I could use my phone or an app to do that. But now I'm on a computer down here. I'm in central Birmingham. I'm actually sat on top of this little bridge just on here using Google Street View. So if you left click and hold on a location on Google Maps, it will drop a pin in that location. And it says down the bottom, Birmingham down here. And it actually gives me the latitude and longitude of that location. So I could write down what my latitude is on here. And I've got a northing and a west value, so I'm about 52 degrees 28 42.3 north, and I'm 51 degree 54 42.5 degrees west of the Greenwich Meridian. So now I know a location, but what I don't know at the moment from this particular location is I don't know which direction I'm facing. So I can work out from the map and from Street View in which direction I'm facing. So I'm facing up this canal here, so I can look at the little orange guy on Street View and you can see which direction he's facing, or you can open up your map and work out I'm facing up the canal in that direction. North is straight up on this map here. So I'm obviously facing in a northwesterly direction. So I'll put down here facing northwest. Now, if I was out in the field, I would also want to write down when this was done. So I would put a date, and I'm just going to put today's date. And I would put a time, and again, I'm just going to put the time at the moment. Now, that wouldn't quite work for my image because this image that's up on Google Maps here has actually got a date to it. It says on the bottom down there that it was captured in June 2018. Should be able to tell it's the summer because of the foliage and things that are around here. The sky perhaps might give me some indications, maybe the number of plants that are out in the bits down the front that have been gentrified. But I'm just putting these down here to make it nice and clear on here. Now the next bit that I'm going to do is probably the only bit that I would do differently if I was out in the field and for you guys back home, which is I wouldn't be using a pen, but I'd be using a pencil. Now I'm going to use a pen because it'll make it slightly clearer on the video what I'm doing, but actually a pencil for this bit is probably key in terms of making sure that you can rub things out if you make any mistakes. So fingers crossed, I don't make too much of a bodge of this. So here's my view, and actually in real life I could spin around and have a look in every direction. I've really got to decide how much of this vista that I'm looking at I want to include here on my sketch map, and that depends really what you're doing out in the field. So for the purposes of this video here, I'm going to use this area here of this image that's on here And that's what I'm going to try and get accurately into my square that's down on here for my field sketch. So what do I want to do? I'm trying to include the really important parts of this image and in some ways exclude some of the unimportant bits. So if I think about this image here, I want to include the buildings, the canals, the greenery, other bits of the geography that are around here. This unfortunate gentleman's head doesn't need to be in my field sketch. So what I would suggest is the first thing you do is you try and pick out the big shapes in your image and you get the main bits that are in there. So if I look at this one, the first thing I can see down the front here is I've got the bottom part of this bridge. So I'm going to add the bottom part of this bridge into my sketch that's on here. And here are my railings on here and my paving slabs on here. And I'm not the world's best artist and I don't need to be, but I'm just adding a couple of posts down on here, and I can add maybe some of those wires coming across in this direction down in here. So I've added my first feature onto my sketch, which is this part here of the bridge. I might even add some of the paving slabs on here just to make it obvious what's going on in the foreground here. They don't have to be exactly the right shapes and sizes on this bit here. And wherever I need to, I can add some labels. So I'm going to try and take my labels off the diagram, make the diagram less cluttered, and wherever possible I'm going to try and stay as neat as I possibly can do. So I'm just going to draw a line on. I'm going to draw a little dot to where they join on here, and I'm just going to put on here bridge across canal. So I'm looking at this image now and I'm thinking, what else are my major features? Well, I've got buildings on both sides of a canal down here. I've got another bridge in the distance across there. I've got some kind of building in the very far distance at the end down there. So what I think I'm going to draw next is I'm going to try and draw the outlines of the canal, because then maybe the buildings can fit around those. So I can see the canals kind of disappearing into the distance up here, and I'll do the same thing on my image here. So I'm looking at what's coming down. This line here comes fairly straight down. There's a tug to the right and then back in. So I'm going to draw that line down in here. And there's one side of my canal. And on the other side, I've got a pretty straight line with some boats in front of it. So I'm going to draw that line coming down and out in that direction over there. So there we go. I've got either side of the canal that's on here. And I can actually see a small footpath on either side. So I'm going to add that footpath onto both sides of my drawing. In the distance over here, I've got a small bridge and some buildings. So I'm going to start adding some bits of detail now to my diagram. Here's the bridge. Here's my building on this far side. And I see, again, I'm just looking for the big shapes. I'm just using the tops and the sides of the buildings here. And I can see this comes up towards me. Tucks in, gets a little bit higher, comes up towards me again. And then I've got some kind of tower up in this top hand corner here. So I'm going to add my tower up in here. And voila, here is my tower up in the corner. Okay, we can see it doesn't have to be perfect. I'm not the world's greatest artist, but I'm adding in some details on either side down in here. We've got buildings on this side. This building comes up a little bit. And I can see here I've got this element of a tree here, so I'm going to add some just very loose bits around here. That's coverage of my tree, and very rough drawing on this side of what's going on in the tree. I'm not following everything exactly, but I'm going to add a few labels in here. So I've got my tree, got the bridge in the distance, and I've got this building in the far distance that I haven't yet added. So I'm going to add that into the far distance as well, down there. So that's on here. It's got some kind of lines coming forwards to it on here, like that. This footpath kind of swept round the corner. This footpath disappears around that corner, round in there. I'm going to add here, I haven't actually written that this central part here is a canal. And I'm going to add on here some footpaths. Right, so now I've got roughly the outline of what's going on in my image, the biggest buildings, the main things that are on there. And now I need to think about what else that I'd like to include. So this is where I start thinking about what I might be looking at in Birmingham. And if I was doing something on regeneration, for example, I'd be looking to pick out the features that were on there that I could then add to my field sketch. So I'm going to start this systematically, and I'm going to start in the foreground of the image, this bit down here, and I'm slowly going to work backwards into the image and add some detail on here. And I'm going to work that way around so that I can draw the things in front, and then anything else can kind of tuck behind it. So I can see that the first things I'd probably pick out on here in terms of gentrification is I've got this greenery down the front in these pots that are on here, some kind of Birmingham in Bloom winner that's on here. So I'm going to add down the front into my diagram on here a couple of pots that are in here. Now I can see 4 in the diagram, but I've added 2, and that's not the end of the world. I've got some pretty amateur flower drawings in here, but this is a field sketch. It's showing me the outline of what's in my location, and just so it stands out a little bit, I'm going to shade these pots in. This would be easier if I was doing it in pencil because I could rub some things out, but I'm going to add, I've got my foreground detail down in here. So plants in pots down on this bit on here. What else do I spot in here? I can see there's actually a banner perhaps behind, hanging off this bridge. So I'm just going to shade in the back of a banner on here, and I'm going to add that onto my sketch. Now I can't see from Google Earth exactly what that banner's advertising, but in real life I could drop down onto the side of the canal, I could have a look back up and see what it was advertising. So let's imagine that it's a banner advertising a charity event in Brindley Square, which is just off to the left of this image. Again, so I'm adding detail to this. This is adding value now to instead of just a photograph, because I'm able to look at things from different angles and pick up different things. So I've got my photographs. I'm now going to drop down out of the real foreground interest here. I'm not really fussed about these 2 gentlemen here that are on here, but I'm actually going to start thinking about down on the right hand side down here. So I'm looking for the key bits that I can see in my image. And what can I see? I've got railings around here. I've got some brickwork up here. I've got a path down here. I've got someone walking around this bit on here. I've got a sign down on there, so I could work out what that sign perhaps was saying. And I'm going to start adding a few of these bits that I think are important. So perhaps I'd be looking at some of the fencing that's around here, and I might add on here fencing included for safety. I might start picking out some of the adverts, so that advertising hoarding, that advertising banner that's at the bottom. I could go and work out what was on that. It's probably something to do with advert for canal boat ride. I'd have a look around. I've got these bits on here that are actually some low lighting down on here, so I'm adding a small bit down on here, just putting a little, almost like a light symbol on either side to show what it is. And I put in here lights for nighttime safety. I've just about got a bin and a bench in there, so if I wanted to, I could add the bin in here, or the bench that was down in that part. I follow this bit round my building. I've actually not completed quite, and there the building comes around here and then goes to some steps that are up on the side. So I've just got some lines here that represent my staircase going around the side on there. So I've got my kind of middle ground interest over here on the right hand side. I'm now going to have a look at this left hand side, and I've got my path down here. I've got some boats in the water. I've got some restaurants. I've got a bar at the top. I've got some other spaces that are up here. So I'm going to try and divide up now, instead of just having my outline of my building, I'm going to try and divide these buildings up a little bit better. And I can see in the nearest thing to me is I've got this one building down here that takes up this kind of space. I've got another bigger building at the top, and I've got a building at the far end down there. So there's really 3 buildings I'm trying to get into this space. I've got a walkway down the middle that gets access to that bridge further down. So I'm going to start with the bridge and the walkway and see what I've done there. Literally with my pen, I'm working out what kind of shapes these lines are. That bridge and that walkway are relatively straight moving across. So I'm going to continue my line fairly flat across here, which was my walkway on that bit there. And that walkway's got some kind of fencing along it. So I'm just going to draw a very crude fencing along my walkway down on here. And I'm going to start off by adding the shapes of this building. So where this building at the top turns, that's the edge of that building. So that's this bit down in here. So I'm going to draw a straight line down there. That's the corner of that building. And this building here has got 2 arches to it, 2 sort of apexes, and a corner here. So I'm going to pick that corner. It's about halfway along or so. So I'm going to go to about halfway along down on here. And on there I've got a double apex. So I'm just going to go 1, 2 into that bit on there. These bits then join left, and this roof runs over towards the left over here. So I've got my building that I've now added onto that side. So I'm going to add anything that I think, I don't need every brick, I don't need every gutter, but anything that I think might be important. Now these buildings here look like they might be old, maybe shipyard buildings from when these canals were used in industrial usage, but they've been converted. And I can see these big areas of glass on here, and that's unusual. And perhaps something that's worthy of inclusion. So I'm going to add my 2 big bits of glass that are over here. Here's one, here's another further down. So again, I'm going to add in, this looks like an important bit for me over here. So huge glass windows over on this section over here. And I've got some sort of veranda and canopy over on this section. So I'm drawing the tops of those up on there. Then I'm going to try and draw the bit that's underneath here. And underneath this section I've got a burger restaurant down at the bottom. So I'm going to add my burger restaurant in here. So here's my burger restaurant underneath, and that's about, it's got sort of 3 parts to it. Again, it's got some little awnings over the top to keep the shade in. And I've got some tables and chairs, some greenery, and these boats that are in here. So I'm going to add these boats first. I'm going to draw just the outline shape of these boats. There's one boat. Let's give them just going to draw a slightly darker bottom to it. And then I've got another boat further up. It's in here. And again, I'm just colouring in some bottom bits on here. So I'm going to add on here, just draw out to this side, canal boats. I'm going to add over here burger restaurant. Right, so the buildings that are in the far distance, I'm not really going to add very much to. Perhaps the things that are at the top I might not need to. I might decide I just want to draw very quickly, like this one down here has got lots of windows, so perhaps I'll give it just some squares on this side round here. And then I might start adding a few things that start adding value to this. So I'm actually going to use a different colour now, because I'm going to start labelling some bits up. So I'm going to use I'm just going to use a blue on here. And my picture's getting a little bit busy now, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to add all the labels I can see in a different colour. So this bit down here, I'm going to put a number 1, and I'm just going to make a little key off the side here. So number 1, handmade burger company. Number 2, I can see at the top up there, number 2 is an all bar 1. Number 3, I've got a plaque on there that says Brinley Place. So Brinley Place. What else can I see? Can I see anything else? There's actually a for sale sign further down here. So number 4, I'm going to add in there, number 4 for sale sign down in here. And then I could even add some other bits that I've learned perhaps from walking around. I'm going to again change colour here, and I'm going to add some bits, some more bits that are on here. So I'm going to talk about a few things that are perhaps slightly off the image up here. So I've drawn an arrow here, and I'm going to put, again, I'm going to do these as number 1. So number 1 steps up to Brinley Place. And draw another arrow down here, number 2. And this direction over off here on the right, if I had a look at my map on here, I can see it goes into the ICC and the Symphony Hall behind there. So I could add that on here, so towards ICC. This building in the background, imagine I didn't know what it was, but it's quite an important part in the middle of my image, so I could walk up and go and have a look at it, but in this case I'm going to go and find out on here what it is. I'm going to go up the canal and I can find out that this building at the top is Arena Birmingham. So I can add in here, this one down here, number 3, Arena Birmingham. I could find out where the bridge went to. I could find out loads of different things that are on here. Now, so far I've got a sketch, and there's some good things about drawing a sketch. I'm really getting to understand the landscape that I'm looking at. I'm really thinking through the landscape, much better than merely me looking at this for a couple of seconds and disappearing. Indeed, I drew field sketches when I was 16 of all the locations along the River Mole, where I did a piece of rivers coursework, and I can remember some of the sites because I stood there for 20 minutes and I drew a field sketch, and I can remember where the accesses were down to the river. I can remember a location where I saw an otter, for example, in the water, and those kind of things were the reason why I did this. I got myself into a landscape much more. Now, if I was there in real life, obviously people would be moving around, and I might add some things that I might pick up from that as well, and some of those might be good in terms of senses. And imagine I was there perhaps in the middle of a working day, and I would see loads of people around this location. So I might start adding some things. I'm going to use letters this time, and I'm going to add in here A. So lots of noise and people enjoying lunch. So I've got that outside the front of my handmade burger company, but actually it's also happening up the top by all bar 1. So I can put the same labels into those same locations. Perhaps B down here, where I have my benches, I'm going to put people eating sandwiches or out for a smoke or on their phone, all those kind of things that are down here. I might add things where I see nothing, so C, no traffic on canals at all. And now I've got a field sketch which is bringing to life this location. It's got the physical elements of what's in there, and it's got, in this case, the human elements that are in here, the physical geography elements that are in here. It's got my elements of gentrification. I've labelled everything up on the side, and I've also got those important bits that add value to just an image, not just my descriptions on there. And actually, when I went home, I'd probably start adding to some of those descriptions. So I'd seen it was a burger restaurant out in the field, and I've labelled that up out in the field. But maybe when I was home that evening, I'd add some value to that. Instead of it just being a label, it become an annotation. So burger restaurant, and then I'd add something like evidence of gentrification. So area converted from industrial to service economy. I might start researching. There's a boat down the bottom. I might have found out the name of the boat out in the field, Googled that when I got home, and worked out that canal boats, one of these does tours, the other is a restaurant. I might start looking around at what some of these buildings were. My big glass windows up there are all part of all bar one, but what's the location that's further down here that I don't know at the moment? Well, I could find out and have a look around on here, and actually I found out that it's a building that belongs to an organisation called Avison Young, who I've clicked on, and I'm rummaging around here and I can see their building, but I know nothing more about them. So quite simply, I'll just find out who Avison Young are. They're real estate advisors. Okay, so I'll add them back into my location on here. So in this bit on here, this building down here, Avison Young, real estate advisor. And there we go. That's a way of getting yourself a field sketch in of a load of detail of a location that's out in the field, just so it's a little bit closer for you and you can have a look. It's got my image here on the left in a clearly framed border, a neatly drawn, clearly framed border. You can see from the image on here that we've got a limited number of lines and details, but it's just picking out the main features. So I'm picking out the canal that runs through the middle, the footpaths, the buildings, the towers, the trees, the foreground image that's on here. And then on the side, these are the kind of things that you'd be wanting on the side. So some descriptions of what's going on. Added to that, some more detail about exactly what those mean. And then on the far right hand side down here, I've got a series of different things that add value to my image already. And what you do and what colours you use are completely up to you, but I find that different colours help pick out similar things. So my themes up here, for my blues, I've gone for all the labels and the signs that I saw in here. My oranges were the directions, and that helped me with what was going on in different directions on here. And my green